Rita Diapoules, thanks so much for joining us. One of my favorite people, one of my coworkers here at Covenant Fellowship Baptist Church. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm really good. Summer,
Good.
so I'm happy.
Yeah. So summer makes you happy. It's less work.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Good.
yes. Yeah, it must
So,
be the teacher, the old teacher in me. To summer, and
oh
it's like,
yeah. Yeah. So why don't you give just a little bit of a background? You currently serve as
hmm
co-director of our children's ministry with Krista Kid. You guys do an amazing job at our church. Um, just a quick background. What was your profession before that? And I don't know. Yeah, we'll just start with that.
Sure, sure. So quick little background. I am married to my husband that I met in high school, and we have two daughters. I started teaching straight out of college. So I was 21 when I started teaching, and I've taught for 11 years in the public school system. Primarily third grade, but all elementary school except for a few 6 months as a ninth grade algebra teacher. And then now we had our second daughter, Delilah, and after having her, there was just a little bit of shift for our family. So I was able to step away from teaching, and now yeah, I work part time at the church in kids ministry.
And you also, if I remember right from your testimony, you came to the Lord as an adult. So this was not something
I
where
did.
you grew up in kids ministry and because it was, such a profound influence on you that you decided to shift over. You actually came to Christ as an adult. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, my husband and I were actually married. So while we came to Christ separately, it was also kind of like at a similar time.
Hmm.
So that was really neat. And yeah, I grew up Catholic. So I did CCD, Wednesday nights, all that stuff till I was about 13. And then didn't really attend church after that until I was an adult. hmm
Hmm.
Yeah.
So did parenting provoke any of the spiritual questions in you? I feel like that's the case a lot of times is somebody has a church background but kind of walks away and then all of a sudden they have these other children that they're responsible for and it can start making you question the deeper things in life a little bit.
Yeah, it was actually pre-children. It would have been when we were struggling to have kids. That's when
Okay.
a lot of questions started. I think it was that like deep-seated want to control,
Hmm.
and I really had to kind of work through that and give that over to the Lord. And that's He definitely used that time in my life to draw me to Him.
Yeah. Um, I this morning I had a meeting and one of my friends who was in the meeting said something. Man, it was so good. I won't say it as good as he did. But something like, suffering needs to have a seat at the table, um, not as an obstacle, but as a means of grace. And it's like,
hmm
man, that's so powerful because so often that's the way it works is that suffering is something that the Lord uses to get at things in us and to bring us to places that we never would dream to go otherwise. And yeah, it was that suffering in your all's relationship that
Yeah.
ultimately brought you the deepest joys.
Yeah, it is. We tried for like a year and a half for Lorelai, which isn't a long time, but when the Lord like puts that desire on your heart and then it's every single day,
Hmm.
and you're having to kind of work through that, a year and a half is a long time. And then after having her, we thought, as everybody kind of shares with you, like, oh, now that you've done that, your body knows what to do, it'll just do it. And so you're like, oh, well, that's great. And that wasn't the case with us again. So it took almost 5 years for us to have our second daughter, Delilah. And in that time, the Lord really, you know, by then I was a believer and I was pretty rooted, but he used it to definitely draw out a lot of things that were not truth a lot of
Mm.
beliefs that I had that I think were just from childhood kind of like pretty ingrained in me. So it's neat to look back now. It was awful when I was going through it,
Yeah.
like nobody wants to be like, all right, Lord, what struggle are you going to give me so that we can get closer to each other? But in hindsight, he definitely used it to shape me.
Hmm.
I thought I would have been a teacher forever. Truly, I thought I would have retired doing that. I absolutely loved it. I still love working with kids. I get to teach my own now at home, which is the sweetest joy. But again, I don't know that I would have, he prepared me for that in those years of waiting. And so when I went back to work after having Delilah, it was very clear that the Lord was like, "You're ready for a different chapter." And I would have bucked that pretty hard before.
Hmm.
And this time I was ready for it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been an incredible blessing for us. So you
Thank
and
you.
Krista, I think we have about 150 to 200 children that you all
Mm-hmm.
help create the curriculum for, oversee, do all of the volunteers. We're gearing up for kids camp at our church right now.
Wow.
But in conversations, because we get to meet pretty regularly, you shared with me something that you were preparing for this summer for your
Mm-hmm.
family and for the kids in our church. And I thought, man, this would be such a cool theme for us to discuss on the podcast. And it's interesting because we talked about suffering and the key role that suffering does play in shaping our character. And as a parent, I know that suffering is going to shape a lot of who my kids are, but also I want as much as possible to be shaped without suffering, like through the
Yeah.
discovery of the awe and wonder of who God is and being
Mm-hmm.
rooted in biblical truth. And oftentimes so that when that suffering comes, I'm grounded and can understand it. And so what we were talking about, you had this hope and desire to use this summer, um, using my words, basically to kind of point your kids at the creator and use the little opportunities and the big opportunities over the course of the summer to kind of provoke some awe and wonder of who God is. And I'm just curious, am I right? Did I hit
Yep.
that
Yep.
pretty decently? Okay.
Yeah. So anybody who's been listening to the podcast knows that it's been a tough season for our church family,
Yeah.
and kind of walking side by side with some of the families that are going through some really hard things are in conversations that I've had. It's just really like the Lord's just put it on my heart. Remember who I am. Remember who I am.
Mm.
And that oftentimes we have to like seek Him first. And when He's able to show us His character and remind us of who He is, that really can help us through those trying times. And so this really just came from, what seeds can I plant in the kids in our church, but also in my own. And also, I think in my heart too this summer, to help remind me of His character and who He is, so that I can see Him with awe and wonder again and not always lament or frustration. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I love summer as an opportunity to do this. Our school year is a bit of a grind
hmm
between getting our kids to pass. I mean, I feel like we spent May making up assignment after assignment after assignment for our boys. They all
that
passed.
like
They
mad
almost
dash
got
to
4 point.
summer.
It was pretty awesome. But um, there's like not a lot of time for introspection as you're frantically
Yep.
trying to just keep up with the grind of school and sports and all of this stuff. And so summer is a great time to, you have a change of pace, you take your foot off the
hmm
gas, hopefully get some refreshing. But I also know that without intention, you can kind of waste your summer. And with your kids, you can get to the end of the summer and feel like, well, they watched a lot of TV and they played a lot of video games, but we really didn't use that summer. And truthfully, you get 15, 16 summers with most
Yeah.
kids before they're off doing their own thing. And so, Rita, what do you see in your children with like what opportunities do you see in summertime that you don't necessarily get during the rest of the year? What are some of those that stand out to you?
I think, again, because I was a teacher, I typically have summers off. And now that I'm part-time at the church, I get the opportunity to be home with my kids in the summer again. And so for us, it's just time. And so, my daughter is a planner. She loves a good calendar. And so we've kind of mapped out some summer plans that we have. And some of those include days at the beach or mornings at the park, and things like that. And so I was just thinking about how we're going to be outside and in nature a lot, and how I could use that time and the slow mornings at home to kind of plant little seeds while we're out and about, whether it be at the beach or at the park or just in our backyard. Um, so that as she's experiencing nature, she starts to really remember the creator of it. And we can
That's
have
good.
conversations that just kind of flow out of her own curiosity because of things that we've talked about in the before.
I love that. So let's just kind of get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of it.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking to do like on a day to day basis? So I think maybe we'll look at like day to day, and then are there some bigger picture like event based? Like what if I'm going on a vacation? What might I
Yeah.
do then? But as far as like home regular routine, um, just remembering too that sometimes you're talking 5 to 10 minutes in a
Yeah.
day, and that's the beauty is like if you can be consistent, and even if you
Mm-hmm.
screw it up and you forget most days, if you do this 3 days a week or 4 days a week, that really starts to add up over the course of the summertime. So day to day, what are some of the things that you're looking to do to help her discover and remember the creator?
Yeah, so the first thing is in the mornings, I typically try, even though it's summer, I still try to get up a little bit before the girls do. And I intentionally bring my coffee and my Bible and a little devotional that we have out onto the porch so that when they wake up, it's just like the natural flow that everybody comes up. There's a lot of research just about light and how different light throughout the day actually shapes our brain's processing of what we're
Hmm.
supposed to be doing at that time. So for us, getting outside in the morning is really important. And that's just been a sweet, at first I was like, I watch TV. It's summer. We don't have to, get ready for school. And she's quickly transitioned to I come outside and I sit down with mommy. And if she's reading, she just starts reading to me.
Huh.
And typically it's from my Bible. And then we have a sweet little The Wonder of Creation devotional. It's 100 days, which is more than our summer break, but it's perfect. And that one is all about observing science and how it ties back biblically with our creator. So I can share that one, but that's another one. Typically, Lorelai, I'll read one of those, and she begs for another one. Mommy, can you read one more?
That's
And
cool.
so that's been a neat, just a little routine that we have. And again, it takes a little intentionality, but just having like my stack ready, and I just grab it and go out onto the porch, and I'm there, and she comes out and just sits with me. It's a sweet time together.
And we'll put the Wonder of Creation devotional. I'll put that link in the
Hmm.
show notes if somebody wants to get and find that.
Yeah, I
So I
loved how
like
you
that
said
'cause-
earlier too, about those small chunks of time adding up. As a teacher, as a former reading teacher specifically, I used to always share with parents that 20 minutes a day of reading would equate, I wrote it down so that I wouldn't forget, to 3,600 minutes a year just during the school year, which would mean your kid was exposed to 1.8 million words in a school year. And then for parents that are like, what will that do for my kid academically? Well, it puts them in the 90th percentile, statistically speaking, just
huh,
reading 20 minutes a day. Um, and so if you transfer that though to summer, 9 weeks, 7 days a week, 63 days, 1,260 minutes throughout the summer, which ends up being 21 hours. So you're talking
wow,
about if you have 20 minutes, and it doesn't have to be all in one sitting, but you have 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, these little conversations and reading and things. That's 21 hours of really rich conversation about whatever you choose to focus on this summer. And so for us, it's our creator and observing him in creation and speaking that awe and wonder so that when we're in the car and she sees birds, who created birds? Where did they come from? Why are they here? Um, Down to little grains of sand.
yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how many things can become a lesson about the Lord if you
Mm-hmm.
make them. We had somebody gift us recently. It was really incredible. It was an orchid with a little chrysalis
Mm-hmm.
on there, um, and I thought the chrysalis was hand painted because it was so beautiful. It's like a jade collar with these little golden flecks on there. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a monarch butterfly.
It is.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but 14 days later we have a butterfly hatch in our house, and it was just such a neat process
Incredible.
because
Mm-hmm.
as time went on, you could see the chrysalis go from that jade to turning black and then getting clear, and you could look inside and actually see the pattern of the wings, and then being able to take that outside and release it after it goes, and then referring back to just one of the things we talked about was if you had never seen a butterfly and somebody tried to convince you that a caterpillar was going to sprout wings and fly, or, if you see a caterpillar make a cocoon and make one of these chrysalis, and then you try to convince me that, okay, this thing that is goo inside here right now
Mm-hmm.
is going to turn into a beautiful flying creature, you would never believe it. And so then translating that back to, this is kind of in the same way when the Bible talks about our glorified bodies and about the new heavens and new earth, that it doesn't give us a lot of description about it. And I think part of that is because you can't fathom it. Even if it would, even if, John and Paul and Peter gave more description, it's we have no frame of reference for it. I like in the end
Mm-hmm.
of and seeds. We've talked about this one a lot. In the end of, I think it's First Corinthians, it talks about how, like, you don't have a tree unless a seed falls to the earth and dies. And in the same way, our bodies are the seeds of the new bodies that God's going to
Yeah.
give us. But you would never imagine a tree if all you had ever
One
seen
looking
was
at
a
a little
seed.
seed. Yep.
And so, we actually, it was pretty neat being at a funeral recently for there was a family that lost a mom in the church, and they planted a tree
Mm-hmm.
there at the graveside, and we talked about that little illustration of like an acorn and a tree, and I don't know, just God has given us so many illustrations like that, if we will look and wonder. And sometimes, Rita, I think what's fun is to challenge your kids to come up
Mm-hmm.
with the illustrations, like, okay, what can you teach me about God from this
Yeah.
leaf or this grass and everything? It's neat that just the imaginations that kids have that you can then play off of.
Yeah. And there's so many times too, I think as parents, you have conversations and you don't feel like you get much, sometimes you're
Hmm.
doing a lot of pulling. And then all of a sudden, days or weeks later, they'll say something and you're like, it's just, you really get it. And it does. And that's where that intentionality piece is so important.
Hmm.
Um, and so if you can just be consistent in the little things, they end up being the big things.
Right. Yeah. Um, as a teacher, I haven't talked to you about this ahead of time, so you might correct me, and then I'm going to edit it out of the podcast.
Okay.
Um, but I would venture to say that, so you spent time in the public school system. You were one of the
Mm-hmm.
teachers of the year at your school, one of the years. So an excellent teacher. But I would venture to say that you, you would agree that, like, that classroom education format is doing the best we can with what we have, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not truly the ideal way for somebody to really learn and grow.
Yeah.
Sitting down and experiencing lecture after lecture is actually a pretty poor way of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that people learn through experience, they learn through coming alongside, they learn through doing and
Mm-hmm.
interacting. And summer times really can be this incredible. I feel the same way about being a youth pastor. I feel like I'm I am hamstrung by the fact that I've got all these kids, and so I have to create a lesson and stand up and teach them, because I can't have 100 students walk around with me as we explore and interact. But as a parent, you can do that with your kids, and you can do
Yeah.
that with their friends. There's the part where you totally agree with me, or we edit out what I said here. What are your thoughts on what I just
No,
said?
I absolutely agree. And I
Oh,
think you're
good.
right
Okay.
about summer. Summer's the perfect opportunity. especially if you have a vacation planned, or, you're doing something together as a family that, even if you're not, don't have a vacation planned, a lot of families do, like, summer is a Friday nights or our movie night or something just kind of intentional. A lot of families that are here because we're close to beaches that I know of, they choose in the summer one night a week they're going to go out and they're going to take dinner. They're just going to pack it in a cooler and bring it out to the beach instead. Because what feels more summer than having dinner at the beach, you know?
Hmm.
So there are a lot of ways that you can incorporate intentionality in, and let your kids really explore one and do that one on one. And if you have four kids, like 4 to 1 is an incredible ratio. As a
It
teacher,
really
like
is.
that
Yeah.
was your small group. And that's where the like money happened. Like, if you
Mm.
really want there to be big growth, get them in a small group. And so if you're talking about a family unit, like that is perfect for being able to
Hmm.
have conversations where you're really eye to eye and you can pick up sand and talk about where it comes from and who created that, and that he literally parted like the water above from the water below and made it stay there.
It's amazing. Another thing that I think is a real opportunity in summertime, um, getting to serve together. There's a couple different things to go with this.
Mm-hmm.
Having time to serve together as a family. We actually this year get to take our entire family on a mission trip
Very
together.
well.
We're doing our youth group is actually it's like man so awesome because July in Florida is horrible and we are going to
Oh,
Alaska in July. Yes, that was a real hard prayer decision to do, but we're actually all going up there, and we get to help run a church
wow.
camp for about
Mm-hmm.
80 children for two consecutive weeks, and been able to arrange it for our entire family to go. And the kids are going to be a part of the praise and worship band and junior counselors, and I'm going to be doing lessons. But we get this shared experience of serving. But even if you can't go to Alaska, um, whether it's in your local church, just calling and saying, "Hey, can we come clean the
Mm-hmm.
classrooms together?" In our area here, I know a lot of listeners are local in the Treasure Coast area. House of Hope got a massive shipment of canned goods in from Publix, like watermelon bin after watermelon bin, and they just need people to come and sort them and take a Sharpie
Mm-hmm.
marker and mark through the UPC codes. And these are things that families can do together
Yeah.
to serve, but there's an incredible bonding that happens with serving and also with parents being a part of kids camp, being a part
Mm-hmm.
of vacation Bible school, because then you are having shared spiritual experiences together. And for many of the kids, church camp, kids camp, stuff like that, those are their highlights of the year. And what I've noticed is a lot of times kids come back and they've had this profound experience, but their parents weren't there. And so, when they ask her, "How was camp?" It was fine. What'd you get out of it? I don't remember. But if you were there, like, man, those sermons, the lessons, the object
Mm-hmm.
illustrations, we really have a lot of chance to talk about them because we were there together. And so sometimes even sacrificing as a parent one of my weeks of vacation, if you have a few weeks, to be involved in a church ministry that my kids are going to be in, really is a profound experience that you get to have that you don't necessarily during the year.
Absolutely.
Um, so Rita, let's talk about, because you've essentially created a bit of a curriculum um, to walk through the summer. Can we talk about the elements of that you have put together?
Sure. So I don't know, curriculum might be too fancy of a word, but
Yeah, that
essentially,
yeah, that sounds like school.
essentially our kids ministry, we send out a monthly newsletter throughout the school year, throughout the year to all of the families in our church. And one of the elements of the newsletter is resources for parents, podcasts, books, websites, and then a prayer calendar for the month. And so Krista and I talked about, well, instead of doing ones throughout each month of the summer, let's just send a whole summer one. And so since I was working on this, like trying to instill awe and wonder in looking at creation in my own kids, we were like, let's do it for church. So I've created I think it's 9. a 9 week prayer calendar for families,
Okay.
and it walks through creation. So week one is all about praying through God creating the heavens and the earth, and then week two is the next part in Genesis, and it goes down the list. So it starts off really big scale, and then it gets smaller and smaller as you go throughout this. So that 1 week is focused on the land and its verses. So it's praying through the scriptures. There's a prayer for each week, but then there's 5 days worth of scriptures that tie back to that prayer. So you can, if you're looking just for those short chunks of time that will add up to be a lot of time over the long run,
Yeah.
you can read that scripture and refer to the weekly prayer. So the prayer is not changing every day because it's summer. We want to give some time for grace and reflection and all of those things. So we just did 5 days a week for scripture reading and then
Okay.
one prayer for the whole week. So, for some people, it's like, that's perfect. And you get 2 days of grace. Or you get 2 days of reflection where you can talk about what you know, all of the discussions that you've had so far. So that's been really fun. And we can link that here too for anybody that would
Yeah.
like it. And then
Yeah, we will absolutely do that.
our resources. There's just a couple podcasts that I've been listening to, specifically related to science and religion and how they're not counter to each other. The more and more that scientists actually discover things within science, the more it aligns with the Bible and
Hmm.
Christianity and backs up the fact that, like, we're literally knitted together. Our DNA is done in a way that looks like knitting. That's not by
Ah,
chance. That word wasn't just thrown in there. The Lord knew what he did when he put that in the Bible. Um, so it's neat because just as I'm listening to and reading about science that backs up the creator, um, I just naturally have these conversations with my daughters about it. And so then later on, they ask questions, and I actually have answers to them that I
that's
might not
great.
have before. So yeah, it's just more of a here's some, prayers that you can be praying throughout summer, ways that you can help guide their little thoughts as they're out exploring. With the 1 week for land, if you're going somewhere where you're going to be surrounded by land like mountains, you don't have to do that on week 5. You can choose to do that on a separate week. If you're going on a
Hmm.
beach vacation, and the week where the prayer is all about thanking the Lord for the gift of water. And use that week to read those scriptures and pray that every morning together or at dinner together and talk about what a gift being in water was this week for your family. So it's
Yeah, I
more,
love that.
just resources and quick little
Hmm.
little bites that you can do with your kids and your family to really have some rich conversations. But again, I mean, 20 minutes a day, 5 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the car on the way somewhere, and then 5 minutes at dinner. You're talking about 21 hours at the end of summer.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, first off, just as you're sharing this, in lieu of the discussion guide this month, we're going to put all of this together as a resource to give you all. So you can check the show notes and there'll be a link. Click on, I don't know what it'll be called. And if you want, I'll also send it in the Things for Thursday email. So text the word things to 66866 and you'll get a bunch of things. You'll get a fun family conversations guide, which is a really fun thing to have at the dinner table and on your drives. It's got deep questions and really shallow questions, fun, silly conversation starters. There's a marriage snapshot tool in there. There's a scripture memory tool, as well as in my weekly email, I will give you this resource that Rita has created. And then, as you were talking, Rita, I I just was thinking, we're talking about being intentional about provoking awe and wonder of God's creation in our
Hmm.
children. Um, but really, a side bonus is we need to be reminded as well
Yeah.
that how am I going to provoke awe and wonder to my kids at something that has become mundane to me? And,
Mm-hmm.
you think about how many things that we take for granted, how many aspects of creation that we take for granted. And, you're one injury away from really appreciating a body part that you never knew existed beforehand. But if you can spend your summer in gratitude, if you can
Mm-hmm.
spend your summer in just kind of awe and marveling, and the beauty is thinking back to school, um, history and science got so interesting when I stopped having to take tests on them.
Mm-hmm.
I love learning about biology now that nobody's asking me to write it down on a quiz.
So
And
true.
I even love learning about history now that nobody's asking me the specific date that something
Mm-hmm.
happened in Waterloo. And so I would encourage moms and dads to dive in again, explore in your own spiritual life. I was thinking this past week, we have a family, like an extended family group thread, and somebody posted something, and then it was like somebody linked that there's a Louis Giglio video. If you go on YouTube, I'll try to remember to link it, but it's like if the earth were a golf ball, and he goes through basically the whole universe comparing the size
Mm-hmm.
of planets and solar systems and suns to the earth, as if the earth were a golf ball, how big is the sun, how big is Jupiter, how big is the Milky Way galaxy, and so forth, and all them back to like how great is our God, because that's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
And so I love redeeming science
Mm-hmm.
from something that people feel like is a weapon to drive people away from Jesus to one of the things that should provoke the greatest sense of awe and wonder and gratitude in our relationship with the Lord. So thank you so much for thinking about this and putting this together.
You're so
Um,
welcome.
any vacation plans that you guys have that you're going to provoke your awe and wonder of the Lord with?
Yeah, so we actually, my daughter just walked up. We
Or
actually
like,
are going to Georgia. My parents have a place there, so
yeah,
we'll be going there. And it's in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So that's
perfect.
going to be the week that we spend talking about land, and reading lots of scriptures about the mountains. And then just adults, we're doing a trip to Costa Rica. So that, I
Mm,
know that one we're gonna, I've never been, so we're very excited. That one will be our water one. And that's about it for trips. We are pretty much geared up for kids camp. That's kind of the biggest thing right now, you know. So
yep.
yeah, our that's our focus right now.
Yep.
Sorry, Lorelai
All
started
right.
bringing snacks.
She brought you snacks.
Yeah.
What a sweet girl.
Yeah.
All right, Rita, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. And I think this is such a blessing. It's low pressure. That's what I love for moms and dads. Like, here's something
Yeah.
you can do that's going to be fun, that's low pressure, that can
Hmm.
really have long-term results. And so that's
Yeah.
that's what we want. We want as many wins as possible that require fun from us instead of it feeling like a chore or drudgery. So thank you so much. I
You're
really appreciate
welcome.
it.
All right.